Welcome back, everybody, to the Fantasy Birds. Today, we are going to be going over three must-avoid running backs in your 2022 fantasy football drafts. Let's talk about three guys that we need to be considering fading in 2022. The first guy I want to talk about is Austin Ekeler for the Los Angeles Chargers. And I know when I put Austin Ekeler on this list, a lot of people are going to throw their hands up and say, there's no chance that we can be fading Ekeler after the season that he had last year. And I'll agree. Ekeler had one of the best fantasy running back seasons we've seen. Number 2 running back in PPR leagues from a season ago. Ekeler had a absolutely dominant season for this Chargers as that offense began to explode at the end of the year under Justin Herbert. But a lot of Austin Ekeler's production came in the form of touchdowns that we have not seen in his previous seasons in the NFL. Let's look at some of the numbers that he's put up in the past 5 years of his career. Total just 25 touchdowns in these 4 seasons until last year when he explodes for 20 touchdowns in one season. So you're seeing in his career 45 total touchdowns, and he produces nearly half this number in one season. We can't expect Ekeler to reproduce numbers like this on a given year after we've seen a 4-year sample size in his career of not being able to score these touchdowns. Some of the reasons for this outlier touchdown season has to do with the committee that we saw in the Chargers backfield. Really no competition for Austin Ekeler from a year ago. Justin Jackson down with injury. Joshua did not turn out to be the running back the Chargers had hoped when they drafted him out of UCLA. So Ekeler really became the all-purpose running back in this offense that we had not seen from him in years past when Melvin Gordon was there taking a bulk of the carries in Los Angeles. And let's look at the numbers on how he got to 20 touchdowns last year. Inside the 5-yard line, we'll call these goal line touches, he scored on nearly 60% of his goal line carries. This number is incredibly unrealistic to project for the upcoming year, as we saw the top running backs from last year. The number 1 running back, Jonathan Taylor, only posted a 40% goal line carry touchdown rate. So Austin Ekeler nearly 20 percentage points higher than the number 1 running back, Jonathan Taylor. We're going to see some regression in this touchdown rate. And without these 20 touchdowns, Austin Ekeler will not be able to provide top 5 running back potential. And let's look more into the history of the top 5 running back finishers in fantasy football. Over the past 5 seasons, only 28% of top 5 finishing running backs have duplicated another top 5 finish in the next season. Over the past 5 years, only 7 of these running backs have done back-to-back top 5 finishes. So the numbers and odds are against Austin Ekeler to finish inside of the top 5. Yet again, only a 28% chance that we've seen in recent history. That, coupled with the touchdown rate that we are going to see some regression for Ekeler in this offense, gives me cause for concern, especially in the mid of first round, especially when we have to look at Isaiah Spiller coming out of Texas A&M as potentially vulturing a number of these carries in this backfield that were not available last year due to Justin Jackson's injury and Josh not being a productive running back that the Chargers expected. Profile for Isaiah Spiller looks a lot better than what we had in the backfield for Los Angeles last season. Isaiah Spiller actually 1,000 yards per season he had at Texas A&M in the 3 years that he suited up for the Aggies. Nearly 5.5 yards per carry in a dominant defensive SEC. That's something we have to keep an eye on. Spiller profiles to be a touchdown goal line running back who can vulture some of these touchdowns and can carry a bulk of the running between the 20s for this Chargers offense. There's obviously arguments for Ekeler to go in the first round with a dominant Chargers offense led by Herbert, even getting better with offensive line upgrades in the offseason. But like we talked about, this touchdown rate is not going to be able to sustain itself when we look at the top running backs in the NFL have not been able to produce this conversion rate inside the 5-yard line that Ekeler did from the previous season. 60% is way too high for Ekeler going forward, even if the offense is even better than it was last season. Spiller's definitely some guy you need to keep your eye on, especially in the late rounds. Definitely a great handcuff running back with flex upside. We're looking more at a Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams from a season ago type split. And Austin Ekeler last season didn't have that, as the running backs behind him were not able to be productive and efficient as they had hoped. So Austin Ekeler, with this touchdown rate declining, with some new added talent in the backfield for Los Angeles, I can't see myself spending a first-round pick on Ekeler this year. I can't see that ceiling from a season ago, duplicating itself for that reason. He's going to be one of our must-avoid running backs in 2022 fantasy football. I know a lot of people are going to have problems with it, but he is going to make the list for the reasons that we stated. A much less controversial player on this list is going to be Cordarrelle Patterson for the Atlanta Falcons, bouncing around from team to team in the early stages of his career. Finally lands in Atlanta, where he finally makes a fantasy impact that we've been waiting for multiple years. Cordarrelle Patterson, a 31-year-old running back. How many running backs do we know after the age of 30 have made serious fantasy contributions? I'll tell you what, the answer is not very many. Cordarrelle Patterson, a great season last year as you were able to snag him off the waiver wire and propel you to multiple fantasy wins as he was dominant for this Falcons offense, as there was really nobody else in Atlanta, with Calvin Ridley being suspended and Kyle Pitts just becoming a weapon for Matt Ryan. A lot of reasons why we're fading him this season. Number one is going to be that touchdown regression that we predict with Austin Ekeler. Last season, Cordarrelle Patterson actually had 11 touchdowns, pretty even split through the air and on the ground. Previous 2 seasons for Cordarrelle Patterson, only 1 touchdown. He manages to flip 1 touchdown in 2 seasons into 11 touchdowns the previous season for this Atlanta Falcons. I don't think I need to tell you why that is going to regress back to the mean this upcoming season. I can't draft Cordarrelle Patterson with the added weapons that this Falcons team has added in the draft. Drake London, of course, the guy that comes to mind, the first-round pick out of USC, big body wide receiver, replaces Calvin Ridley for the time being. Kyle Pitts, the incredible tight end prospect out of Florida that we saw emerge as a top 5 tight end in fantasy last season. And the backfield competition increases for Cordarrelle Patterson, just like we talked about with Austin Ekeler. Tyler Algier coming in, drafted later in the draft, albeit, but still some significant competition in this backfield. Last season, there was absolutely no competition as the Atlanta Falcons found out that Mike Davis was definitely not a running back worth even rostering, cut immediately from the team in the offseason, let go after 1 short stint with the team. Everyone thought Mike Davis could have a very decent role in this Falcons offense, but clearly after a couple of weeks, they saw he has absolutely no fluidity, no elusiveness in his game left. So Mike Davis cut from the team, and Cordarrelle Patterson really the only option moving forward the rest of the season for Matt Ryan, coupled with Kyle Pitts. So he definitely benefited from the lack of weapons in this offense last year. But 31-year-old running back with increased backfield competition and clear touchdown regression on the other side this upcoming season. Definitely not somebody I can even waste a 7th, 8th round pick on this year. You're not going to get your value back from a 31-year-old Cordarrelle Patterson. And we haven't even talked about the downgrade at quarterback this Falcons team is going to see. Matt Ryan, a former MVP just a couple seasons ago, leaving for the Indianapolis Colts, and you're subbing in Marcus Mariota, who hasn't started in the NFL for a couple of years. With Marcus Mariota at quarterback, Tyler Algier projected to get a portion of the snaps in the backfield for the Falcons, and weapons like Drake London and Kyle Pitts on the outside. I don't see how Cordarrelle Patterson can provide value in fantasy this season on a struggling Atlanta offense with all these added weapons. Cordarrelle Patterson is definitely a guy we need to be avoiding in 2022 fantasy football. The last guy we're going to talk about being on the must-avoid running back list in 2022 is going to be Damien Harris for those New England Patriots, leading running back from a year ago, the number 14 running back in fantasy, half PPR setting in 2021. We are saying do not draft him for a number of reasons. The main one is going to be that touchdown rate that we've been talking about with Cordarrelle Patterson and Ekeler projecting to regress this upcoming season. Last year, Damien Harris, a total of 15 touchdowns in 2022 with only an expected touchdown rate of 7 touchdowns given his volume in this New England offense. So he outperforms his expected touchdown rate by nearly 8 touchdowns and still finishes outside the top 12 running backs. This doesn't say enough why we need to be avoiding Damien Harris. I'll give you some more pointers here. Ramondre Stevenson, huge workload at the end of the season. Took him a while to get going in this offense, as rookies do in Bill Belichick's scheme. But not only do they have Ramondre Stevenson coming off a great rookie season, they also draft Pierre Strong, that profiles to be a big goal line back. Even with Pierre Strong coming out of the draft for this team, they also have James White coming off an injury that should be looking to get back into form this upcoming season as the receiving back for this team. That's another reason we need to be looking at Damien Harris as a player to fade in 2022. His receiving work in this offense is basically a zero factor. Only one target a game the last 8 weeks of the season. Zero opportunities for him in the passing game, especially with James White coming back. He's going to completely take him out on third downs. With the volume opportunities being very limited in New England, with the number of running backs rostered on this team that will have a role for this offense, we can't look at Damien Harris, a guy that can duplicate 15 touchdowns from a previous season. We talked about the goal line conversion rate for Austin Ekeler and how it was unsustainable, and we're going to do the same thing for Damien Harris. 65% of his carries inside the 5-yard line landed in the end zone for Harris the previous season. This is not going to be able to be sustainable, as we saw Jonathan Taylor, the number one running back. We keep pointing to Jonathan Taylor as an example because he was clearly the best running back in fantasy football last year, only a 40% conversion rate inside the 5. So 65% for Damien Harris is not going to be a realistic goal for him in 2022. We need to be jumping off the Damien Harris wagon, fading him in drafts, as he's going to see less volume in this offense and definitely less touchdown equity with that regression in the conversion rate and opportunity rate, with Pierre Strong and Ramondre Stevenson becoming even more valuable in this offense. Damien Harris on the last year of his contract in New England. Clearly, New England is handicapping itself for Harris to no longer be on the team after this season with the Pierre Strong draft pick. With all that being said, we have to be fading Damien Harris in 2022 fantasy football. Those are going to be our top 3 guys that we are fading at the running back position in 2022. Austin Ekeler, Cordarrelle Patterson, and Damien Harris. Thank you guys for watching this episode of the Fantasy Birds, and we'll see you guys next week with another pod.